Hello, everyone. I am Becky Davidson. I am the program director here at Morehead State University, and we're gathered today to sort of talk about how social work education in Kentucky is and our journeys and choices towards furthering our education in social work. So we have representation from all over the state and from different levels. And the hope today is that we are just going to have a conversation that will be informative about different pathways to continue your education in social work. So we are going to start here with Amanda from Murray State. So Amanda, can you introduce yourself, please? You're muted, I think.
Yeah,
okay.
It didn't want to unmute. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
My name is Amanda. I am just a few short months away from graduating with a BSW from Murray State University, and I am currently in the middle of my internship.
Thanks, Amanda. Brandon, how about you?
Hey, I'm Brandon Mitchell, and I am a doc student in the Kent School of Social Work at the University of Louisville.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. Cassidy?
Hello, I'm Cassidy Howard. I am currently an advanced standing student at Western Kentucky University pursuing a Master of Social Work.
Great. And Tiffany?
Hi, I am Tiffany Hayes, and I'm currently on track to earn my DSW from the University of Kentucky.
Great. And Ashley?
Hello, I'm Ashley Justice. I recently completed my MSW at the University of Pikeville.
Great. And Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm an advanced standing MSW student at Eastern Kentucky University.
Great. Okay. So I have asked all of our participants to sort of answer a few questions. So the format of this is I will sort of put out the question and then we'll kind of go around the room for that and have a conversation about that. So, so the first question is for you to kind of tell us your story about your educational journey. So why did you choose social work? Did you start in social work? Did you change into it? Just kind of give us the why social work? So we'll go backwards around just to keep it more interesting here. So Leah, you're gonna go first.
Okay, so I actually did not start in social work. Oh my God, my cat chose this moment. So I started my undergraduate in music therapy, and I realized that that's super clinical and that's not necessarily the route I wanted to go down. So then I switched to social work because it had the aspect of just like helping people that I wanted, and it was so general that I could kind of work in any population and I could do so many things with social work. I did my undergraduate degree at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania. I did my BSW there, and then I took 2 years off. The first year was to deal with some family things. The second year was to start dealing with the pandemic. And then I figured, well, I guess I'm here, so, and it's not going away. So I applied to a few MSW programs and I ended up at EKU. My program is completely online, so I'm actually located in New Jersey, and an online program was just best for me in this moment, so I can kind of stay close to my family. It had a certificate program that I really liked, and I was able to keep my advanced standings, and I also had a professor that had retired from my undergraduate, and this was his alma mater, and he came back to teach in the master's program, and so he kind of convinced me also to come look at the master's program with him, and so here I am at EKU.
Thank you, Leah. Great. Okay, Ashley, how about you? How did you get into social work and where did you go with that?
So I did not start in social work. I started out actually at a different institution when I was a creative writing major. And when I transferred to the University of Pikeville, they didn't have that specification. And so I started to look at different majors. Did I want to stick with English? And I was talking to my advisor about it, and they got to know me, my hobbies, what I enjoyed doing. And she's like, sounds like you need to be in a profession where you're helping people. And so she put me in an intro to social work class. I took a pre-education class, still doing English too. And then I just fell in love with social work. I fell in love with the field. I think sometimes people can have, myself included, I had a narrow view of social work when I came to UPike. And then being in that class and just seeing how diverse it is and everything that you could do and all the ways that you can help people to partner with them, that just really attracted me to the field. And so I switched to social work. I declared my major. I also still went with English. I double majored because I couldn't give that up either. But I just had a fantastic time in my undergrad, and I decided to pursue my MSW as well. And so I went straight from after I completed my BSW, UPike actually started their MSW program. And so we went into that. I was advanced standing and was able to complete that degree in a year. So I graduated with that this past August in the inaugural class with a specialization in mental health and substance use disorders. And so I didn't start out in social work, but I'm very happy that that's where I ended up and that that's where I still am.
Great, thank you. Cassidy, how about you?
So I graduated in high school in 2017, and I went straight to community college in Tennessee, Volunteer State Community College, and I was a criminal justice major, wanting to pursue a career. And there's a specialization job where you can be a cop, but specifically helping special needs adults. So that is what I planned to do, but I changed my mind and realized I wanted to help people, but I also do not have the physical needs of a cop. So that changed my route up. I then started taking some social work classes and felt like I found like my forever home, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I have never taken any gap years. I have been to associates, to bachelor, straight into master's. And I think I chose Western to continue my master's degree because the benefits of a master's degree are plentiful. And it was just too hard to pass up the good advanced standing deal. So,
Yeah, the advanced standing is a real bonus. And I love, Leah, that you mentioned that. I mean, you're in New Jersey, but your advanced standing still worked, in another state, which is really great. I hadn't really thought about that before, so that was cool. Yeah. All right, Tiffany, how about you?
So I started out, I thought I was going to be a nurse when I grew up. I think so many social workers do that too. I think it's not uncommon. But I was privileged enough to have a good family friend who was taking MSU at Mount Sterling classes when I was a junior in high school. And she said, come to college with me tonight. I have a really great professor who would love if you came. And it was social work, death and dying class. The topic was suicide. So it was a very interesting thing to jump straight into. I decided I wanted to go major in social work. So once I got into school at MSU, I tried a few semesters in nursing just to see if it stuck. It didn't. And I got my minor in chemical dependency and Spanish language and culture. I jumped right into the advanced standing integrated behavioral track at UK because although I didn't want to be a nurse, I still have this love for healthcare, and I have this passion for health equity for all people too. So then I got into a job where I did my practicum, and I'm working for UK. I wasn't originally intending on earning my doctorate, but they help support your education when you work there. So the DSW program opened up And I thought, this is my chance, because I always thought that I wanted to get the highest degree that I could. I came from people before me who never had the opportunity to go to school. So I kind of feel like I owe it to the people before me to do, since I have that privilege and that chance.
That's great. Thank you, Tiffany. All right, Brandon, you have the longest story because you've been in school probably the longest.
I was worried you're going to say I'm the oldest, which could be true also. So I didn't go back to school until I was 27. So I'm a non-traditional student, and I went back to community college, studying music for a few years. And then things didn't really work out there, and I switched over kind of on a whim to the University of Michigan and started studying psychology, where I got my undergraduate. And I'm fascinated with psychology, still am. But I was concerned that it was a very deficit-based field that is kind of obsessed with pathologizing humans in a way that I just wasn't enjoying, and I didn't think it was beneficial to our society. And I switched into a master's program at the University of Michigan and got my master's there, and was fortunate enough to have some really good mentorship there in research, and got involved in research and really got inspired and transferred, or I finished my master's, and then I applied to the University of Louisville, where I'm studying to get my PhD in social work.
All right. And Brandon, what are you doing for a dissertation?
Well, it seems like I'm going to be studying the school censorship legislation, the critical race theory bans that are kind of sweeping across our nation right now. So I'm interested in the role of social workers in schools and educational equity. And I'm also interested in how the media kind of perpetuates stigmas and stereotypes in a way that reinforces the experiences in schools that are so problematic. So, and there's just so much happening across our country with regards to the legislation.
Yes, interesting. Yes. I love, sometimes in social work, or when we think about PhDs or DSW, that doctoral level, we sometimes think it's all this research that is kind of maybe not super applicable or something, but of course in social work we have this idea of practice informed research and research informed practice. So I love that your dissertation or your work in that field is just going to be involves all of those components of social work. Absolutely. Great. Okay. And Amanda.
Hi. So as long as I can remember, from the time I first started talking, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and all the way up until I joined college for the first time, I was still on that track. I was in a pre-vet program in East Tennessee, and I was going to a private college, and they raised tuition and they did not raise financial aid. So I had to drop out, but I was determined to go back. And part of that was working as much as I could. And at one point I got a job as a nanny for 4 children in Knoxville. And I took care of them for a little over a year and a half before I came back to this area to take care of my grandma. So during that time, I had always wanted to work with animals, and then working with kids again made me realize that I wanted something else with my life. I grew up in my mom's daycare, so I was used to working with kids. I had plenty of experience, but I never really saw myself doing that until then. So I talked to everybody that I cared about, and I just tried to figure out what was right for me. And at one point, my blue grandma put me in touch with her friend who was a social worker in the foster care system. And At first, that really seemed like something that I was interested in. After I got into the BSW program, I started learning about family preservation, and that became more and more interesting to me, especially as I learned more about the disparities in the child protection system that are, due to race and poverty and many other issues that families can't control. So that's kind of what brought me back to that area of interest. Brandon, I will say you're only a few years ahead of me. I was 23 when I got back in school, so don't feel bad about that part. But yeah, I was not ever thinking about doing something like this, but then it just kind of, as soon as I decided that I wanted to work towards this, everything fell into place. And I'm a big believer of everything happens for a reason. So it really, the more I planned, the more things just happened the way I wanted them to. So.
Thank you. That's great. And I think, it's so great to hear all of our stories about how we ended up in social work. And it's kind of interesting that I don't think any of us started in it. So I was sociology. I was fascinated by people and their interactions with each other. And I had stereotypes about social work too. I thought I didn't want to work in child protection. And I thought that's kind of what it was, So, not until later when I started working with Upward Bound and some of those other programs, did I ask, like, what degree do you have? When I saw people doing the work that I wanted to do. And I heard masters in social work all the time, and it was like, okay. So I went back to school later and completed that MSW and then moved into the field of work. But and I am currently working on my doctorate in education, which is an EDD, which is even another option there, because I am also, like Brandon, I am interested in the intersection of social work and education. I think we are asking teachers to be social workers and without any training. And we're asking social workers to be educators really all the time. So I'm interested in, especially in issues of empathy, having empathy for educators to have some empathy towards situations that families are in. So I'm looking at measuring that. So yes, so I love that we're all sort of on a different pathway here, and it's not necessarily been a straight straw. I used to give my students a crazy straw, the straw that moves around. And I said, this is more of what life looks like. It's not a straight straw. There are curves in this. You swing and come back. So to hear all of your stories kind of shows there are a lot of different ways to get there. So well, we kind of answered a lot of our second question as well, so that's fine. So we'll move on to our third one. So if you can kind of reflect back on your educational experiences, if you could sort of come up with an activity or an experience that you had that impacted you the most as a student, if you could just share that with all of us and so we can hear those stories. Okay, so we're gonna we'll go in the middle. I'll keep mixing it up here a little bit. So Cassidy, you're in the middle on my screen, so it's you get to go first.
All right. So I think the most experience that I guess has taught me a lot and everything is definitely internships. My bachelor's degree internship was at the Office for Children with Special Healthcare Needs, and my current internship is through Western Kentucky. It is the Beacon Project, which is basically taking care of accounts, mental health, everything and above for foster care alumni. So people who have left the system come to college. So internships have taught me So much. And then I also am a GA right now as the admissions coordinator. So that has really helped me out because it's fostered a lot of connections with the department. Professors know who I am. I was recommended for this panel. So building those connections with your peers, and the cohort model gives you peer support. It gives you knowing when I leave Western, I have a social work family that I can ask questions and have support with them. So I know I threw a bunch at you, but internships, GA positions, and cohort model has definitely helped me out a lot.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of us have similar things in that as well. So yeah, great. Okay, Tiffany, how about you?
So I loved the practicums and the internships that I did. I did 3 of them in juvenile justice, just various hours, like long and short. But what I really loved was lobby day, and I really loved being an intern my senior year with NASW, the Kentucky chapter. I felt like I got so fired up and so excited when new bills were on the horizon. I felt like I was really getting a grasp on, advocacy, because the code of ethics and the way that we are obligated to live is, well, to work. But I think also there's a little part of you personally that you're obligated to live this way too, is advocacy and to support, the greater good for society. So I would have never known anything about politics. I would have never known anything about current events, I don't think, because I just wasn't raised in a way that those were things that you paid attention to. And so being in an advocacy setting felt like this great awakening for me that now I can't ever get away from. So it's a blessing and a curse.
Yes, I think that is true. It's like when you find that fire in your belly, it's like, all right, now I got to do something with it. Yeah. And it changes the way you see the world. Sure. Good. Brandon, how about you? What's a experience or an activity that you did that impacted you?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. So I mentioned the mentorship. A couple of faculty were very supportive in getting me inspired about research. And I also had 2 different courses in program evaluation that were in the community and working with community partners that were phenomenal. And they're also that's very research oriented as well. And so I had those things kind of combined in a way that really inspired me. Really, really good experiences to be able to connect with the community and feel like you're supporting local community agencies. So really good experience.
Yeah, so you got to see that research in action and in the sense of that community development and needs assessment. Great. Okay, Amanda, how about you?
So probably the best example I can think of is actually what brought me to this panel today. I'm part of the NASW Kentucky Board of Directors. I'm the BSW student representative, and that happened at a time when I was working really hard and I was kind of feeling like nothing was going wrong, but I was kind of feeling like I could be doing more, or maybe getting a little bit of imposter syndrome. And then out of nowhere, one of my favorite teachers said, "Can I recommend you for this?" And it was very humbling, but also it helped a lot with just making me feel like I belonged where I was. And it's been such a learning experience. And I just, I feel like I also have worried about actually finding a job when I get out of school, because I'm a worrier, so I worry about everything. But just, the people on board saying, we're going to fight over where you're coming because they're all from different schools and things like that. Like, obviously that's a joke, but it building these relationships just really makes you feel more at peace with what you're doing and makes you feel really like you're where you need to be. So I think that this entire experience has not only been a tremendous learning experience, but it's also just really helped me feel like what I'm doing is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. And, Amanda, you bring up a good point, and this is kind of part of the lobby day experience, is that sometimes we do think we're the only ones out there, or our school or our cohort or our, and to really, when you get involved at the state level like that, through a NASW Kentucky or whatever, it really does broaden your perspective and it builds your network, right? You start to meet people from other associations, from other schools, and I think that's one of it's just great to see that other people are passionate about the same things you are, and going about it maybe a little differently, but still all with that same goal. Yeah, I think that's really good to broaden that and remind ourselves like we're part of a bigger community, really. So, and on that note, we're going to go to Leah, and she's going to represent Beyond Kentucky. So, yeah, it really nationally and really internationally, but especially it's great to think about social workers doing things all over the place. So, all right, Leah, what about you? Experience or activity?
So, in combination with Amanda and Tiffany, I am an intern at the NASW New Jersey chapter. So it really is everywhere. So working with them has been really great. I really loved advocacy and being able to work with them and do advocacy on their part. So doing like looking up bills and putting in our support slips. We're working on amicus briefs to go to the New Jersey Supreme Court and stuff like that. So that's been really eye-opening and really has helped me find like my home. But in undergrad, truly, my advisor was one of the leading researchers in animal-assisted interventions, which is like dog therapy and sometimes horse therapy and animal-assisted crisis response. So getting to do a lot of research with her was a lot of fun because it always involved a dog, and getting to present with dogs and getting to just have dogs in class. That was just always something that was memorable to me and made me like actually, not that I didn't want to go to class, but it was always just that extra level of, oh, I'm going to go to class today and there's going to be a large fluffy dog in there. And it made research a lot more fun because I'm not somebody who loves research. I do it as I need to and it's not the worst, but getting to also just be like, oh, I'm researching with a dog. I'm doing this with a dog. I'm presenting at the NASW Pennsylvania conference with a dog. So a lot of dog research really kept me going in my undergrad and now in my master's, now that I am strictly online. Getting to be in my NASW kind of cohort, meeting people from other universities around the state and a little bit out of the state because we're the New Jersey and Delaware chapter, and we have some people from New York also. So kind of meeting those kind of people and learning what they all want to do and how we all kind of can bounce off of each other. So, and that we all bring something new to the table. Like they'd never heard of all the dog research. So I get to bring that, and other people get to bring like business and tech and all that other fun stuff. So I really just love the learning aspect of all of it.
Yeah, I feel the same way as you, Leah. Like there's just almost, it's a regular thing for me to hear about what social workers are doing in new fields, you know. So yeah, this animal support or animal therapy, you know, that's definitely an area, a new area, a newer area for social work. You know, I think it's interesting right now that we're moving in the direction of embedding social workers in places that wouldn't typically have a social worker, you know, like an EMT or ambulance and or ERs, or I guess we've had them in ERs, but you know, or police staff, you know, to do first responding. It's really interesting, and it's exciting to me to see that people are seeing that social work plays into those different arenas or practice areas in a really unique way, that social work has something unique to contribute in that situation. So love that. Okay, Ashley, how about you?
So like you guys, I feel like there are so many different experiences that I could talk about. I did for undergrad, I did my practicum with Girl Scouts. And so I traveled to different elementary schools, after school programs, nonprofit organizations, and I facilitated the Green Dot program, you know, for anti-bullying. And I just absolutely loved that experience. And it was a side, you know, I never thought of Girl Scouts as social work. And so that's another example of just, you know, how broad the spectrum is. With my master's, I was able to do my practicum with a housing authority in another state. And so, you know, doing that, that really opened my eyes, to community organization. I was able to work with individuals, families, the community as a whole to figure out, you know, what are their needs? What supports can we put in place, you know, to partner with them and help them better themselves. We did like fresh food initiatives. We did a reading club for the kids, you know, different things like that. But probably one of the most impactful experiences was an event called the IPE, which are university hosts. And so it's interprofessional education. And so it's social work students, nursing students, med students, optometry students, and pharmacy students. And so we all get together once a year and we're given a situation. So one of my favorite experiences that year, we have a festival called Hillbilly Days. And so it was like, the situation was we were at Hillbilly Days and there was a fire at the festival and now it's turned into a triage situation. So as a social worker, what is my role in that situation? How would I help those families? How would I coordinate, help between everybody, like all the, different professions there. So it sort of opened all of our eyes to see how we could work together, the importance of each field. And at the beginning of the experience, there were a lot of people there that were like, why is a social worker here? And by the end of it, they were like, yes, come over, like help me with this person. What can we do? And so that was probably my favorite event. Just because it was eye-opening for me, but it was also an educational event for, other professions to see the value of social work, how diverse it is and how, rather than being like, why social work here, being like, yes, so social workers here, let's work together. So that's probably one of my favorite experiences that I had.
Well, I love that idea, Ashley. I'm going to think about that one because what a cool thing to sort of cultivate that idea of interdisciplinary work, and you all know this, but it's rare that you have an agency that is all social workers. It's rare, very rare. People may have titles, but I mean, if they're actually social workers with that social work training. And so I think, as you guys all have sort of mentioned, is, having to learn how to talk about our profession, how to explain what social workers do. I think that is a challenge for our profession, and because people have assumptions obviously about what we do, and changing those ideas and challenging those stereotypes and sort of helping people broaden that and think about that unique approach of social work. And people don't get it right away, until, like Ashley said, then they see it and they see the benefits from it. And then they're like, I want that social worker, yeah, very interesting. Good. Okay. So if you had to give some advice to future or current social work students, what would you tell them? So we're going to start with Tiffany. Surprise.
I would tell current and future social work students to network as much as you possibly can. Build strong connections with your practicum supervisors and your classmates and your professors and advisors, just anyone that you come in contact with, and build your professionalism while you are also making those connections, because those are the people who are going to get you your jobs. And those are the people who are going to get you your references. And you want to have a good job. And they're also going to be the people who are going to be your mentors, because social work is a difficult career sometimes, or a lot of times. And that's the reality of it. So we need our people to support us. If I did not have the coworkers that I had as I went through the COVID pandemic in a hospital social work setting, I don't know where I would be today, because it's been so tough. And if I did not have the professors that I had, if I had not had the classmates that I had, whom I still maintain really strong connections with, I don't know if I would feel as successful as I am. I don't know if I would be in a spot where I feel like I'm truly growing as a social worker.
Yeah, well said, Tiffany. Yeah, those connections, they matter for sure. Good. Cassidy, how about you?
The advice I would give is to use this time to learn about yourself, try new things, take odd jobs in areas you're interested in, so you know what your focus needs to be on. Study, and have a self-care plan in place. Mine is buying books, wandering Barnes and Noble, and eating burrito bowl on campus. So always have a self-care plan, because on days you need it. So yeah.
Yeah, and we still talk about this as faculty. When you have been in social work, and even when you're teaching about it, this is something we as faculty talk about, is we teach self-care all the time, and we're not always practicing it, and so yeah, we have to have plans there for sure. So I have heard about those burrito bowls at Western Kentucky. My kids both they were at the Gatton Academy there, and they talked about the burrito bowls. That's the thing they miss the most. So it must be a really good self-care thing.
It is amazing. And I dog sat for someone, and they were like, do you want me to pay you money or burrito bowl? I'm like, a burrito bowl, please.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You don't need a Bitcoin. You just need burrito bowls there. So, all right, Brandon, how about you? What advice would you have?
Yeah, so a couple things. I would say be persistent in your efforts to make connections. So I've been really interested in research for a long time, and trying to get involved in research isn't easy. And it takes persistence in trying to build these connections and these networks. And it's still difficult to get responses from folks. But you'll make connections if you are persistent. And try to build your community, like get involved in committees, and it really helps you to feel engaged and feel connected to your surroundings.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Just so you moved from another state to come in. In graduate school, we have such interesting options in graduate school now with online and hybrid and, you know, all these kinds of things. So talk a little bit about the doctoral program and how community is built there.
Yeah, so in my school, there's 4 folks in my class. So it's a cohort system. So we all came together at the same time, and we'll go through each class. Basically, all of our classes have been together except for a couple electives that we've taken outside of the department. But we're also encouraged to get involved with regards to service. So getting connected to committees on campus and student committees and faculty-based committees and getting involved in the community has been really a great way to build networks.
Good, thank you. I know that in doctoral programs, that is a big emphasis, is to build out in addition, you know, in network and do that through service, because of course that's what you'll be expected to do as an academic, is that continue that research and service. So, okay, and Tiffany and Brandon, I know Tiffany, her camera's off, but I do have one more question for you. What, for many people who want to go into doctoral programs, there's a draw of research, obviously, but also teaching. So tell us a little bit about what experience you've had with teaching and what that's like for you. Tiffany, you want to go first?
Sure. And if you guys see me rocking, there's a anxious beagle right next to me. So yeah, I'm actually doing an educational concentration for social work because my goal is to teach full-time someday. I also this past semester just started teaching as an instructor, and interestingly enough, I'm teaching a social welfare policy class to master's level social work students. That's right up my alley. I enjoy it so much, and I had professors who gave a whole lot to me. And so my goal and my drive is to give back to students what I had received, because again, this is a career that you have to have support. And going back to the NASW Code of Ethics, one of our obligations is to, you know, serve social work students, I think, in helping the profession. And so we've always got that duty to help the next generation. As far as the DSW, lots of people have questions about, you know, what's the difference in DSW versus PhD. And this one is a little more practice oriented. So I don't know if a ton of DSW students teach, but I do know that there are many that I know who are teaching as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And thank you for pointing out a DSW is a more practice oriented doctoral degree. There's a capstone usually project that you're doing, whereas a PhD is going to be more extensive research and a substantial dissertation. So Brandon, have you had to teach in your program yet, or is that an expectation at U of L?
Yeah, it is an expectation. So I'm a teaching assistant in my first semester right now. So getting my first, and so we had a couple other courses that kind of lead up to that too. So we get a teaching experience, and then we go into being an assistant. And then after that, I can move into some of my own courses. Very exciting.
Okay. Yes. And, you know, I that's an important element, because we do have students who want to move into those positions. And so there are different pathways to that as well. So, okay. Amanda, how about you? What advice would you have for students in social work?
So in my job before I started this internship, I worked with a lot of college students because I worked in a college bookstore. And I would hear all the time that, they're uncertain. They don't know if they should be starting school during the pandemic. They don't feel like they'll get as much out of it. But I will say that since I've come back to school, 90% of my classes have been completely online. And all of my social work classes were online because I did a little bit of my associate's degree before the pandemic started, but by the time I got to MSU, it was completely started already. So I haven't met any of my professors in person. I've only met 5 or 6 of my other students in my program in person. And after saying all that, I just want to let students know if they're worried about starting an online program, or if they're worried about being in school specifically during the pandemic, I've made wonderful relationships with my fellow students. I've had great conversations inside of and outside of class with my professors that really show me that they know me as a student and as a person, and I've only had them in class. So, I mean, other than a few phone calls and emails outside of class. So I just want to say that if you put in the work to get to know people, you get a lot out of it. It's not the same experience as going to, living on campus or anything like that. And I'm also an hour and a half away from main campus. So I'm at a regional campus. So that's why I've only met a couple of students, but if you put in as much into it as you want to get out of it, you can have a wonderful experience still. And then the only other thing I have to say is self-care, especially if you have a lot of assignments and you feel like you just need to power through. I am a firm believer if you feel like your work sounds like nonsense, stop, do something that really makes you feel good, and then get back to it, because self-care is something that, especially in some of the subjects that I've taken that are really hard to deal with, you really, really need to focus on that plan and what makes you feel good, which for me is baking and video games and reading. So
Yeah, Amanda, thank you for pointing this out. I did not go to college during the pandemic. My kids are doing that. They started in pandemic. So I'm really glad you pointed this out, that it is different for many of our students, especially coming into the program. And for many of you, you might have been in a program that switched halfway through. That happened for us at Morehead State. We were face to face, and then COVID came and we had to switch to online. And now we're trying to switch back, and we're doing that. But of course, now we're masked, and that changes the dynamic in the classroom too, for both the faculty member who has to teach through a mask, but also you can't read faces in the same way. So you're right, Amanda, this is an unusual time in that way. And so that advice of like hanging in there and, still seeing that you can still connect even virtually or through, email or things like that. But I think we just have to be more intentional about it. It's not going to just fall into our laps in the way that when you go in and out of class, you have that, I call it the before and after talk, right? Like the chatter on the way in and the chatter on the way out, that's what we've lost really. So yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right, Leah, how about you? What's your advice?
So I'm going to bounce off a few people. So I graduated my undergraduate in 2019, so pre-pandemic times. So switching to completely online in a different state than a good majority of my classmates. EKU does fall A and fall B, and the semesters are split into A and B. So my fall A, I I really had a hard time adjusting from like being in person with all my classmates to being so far away from them. So once fall B came, and there's kind of a cohort that kind of started making just like a group chat with them and meeting like in optional Zoom classes, that really like helped me build relationships with people that just made the program less isolating. And just because I am online and so distant from everyone, it really is nice to just get a text from somebody every once in a while, just be like, hey, is anybody else struggling with this? And it's like, yes, I also am. And it's really nice to hear that somebody else is. And then I think my other piece of advice is, if you have the option, join Phi Alpha. I'm a Phi Alpha person. I was the vice president in my undergrad. We're trying to get it. We have a slow growing chapter at EKU, and it has just made my life a lot easier, being able to find other social workers, just being like, oh my God, you're Phi Alpha, I'm also Phi Alpha, and being able to, like, that is such a window into networking that has made my life a lot easier and has made getting to know people a lot easier, and having like just service ideas and things that I want to look into has all come from like doing Phi Alpha and doing things like that. And that has been something that I really treasured as an undergraduate student, and trying to get it restarted back up in my MSW program has been something that I have really enjoyed. So if you can join Phi Alpha wherever you are, you should do it.
Right. And a lot of programs, if they have Phi Alpha, and some have just student, like social work student organizations, but you're right, it builds this network. And another thing, we have, when you said Phi Alpha, I always think about conferences, like at national conferences, they always have Phi Alpha representatives and students. And I just think that's really important for students to get out there if they can get to conferences. Even, at KSWE does a spring conference, and we ask for student presentations and things like that. And really putting yourself out there in that conference world is another important component of that. So, yeah.
I did a conference in my undergrad I did a conference in my undergrad for social work that was really great. They weren't asking for students, we just applied. Just do it. And then I also did conferences. I had a dual major in gender and diversity studies in my undergrad, so I presented a lot of conferences there. So just getting on that conference circuit is something that really adds value to your resume. And if, as a student, just try and get in as many conferences as possible. Just either go to them or present at them. I love conferences. Even like just Googling them, someone will sometimes sponsor you. The university sponsored me a couple of times to go to conferences, so I didn't have to pay for a lot. So just getting on that conference track is amazing.
Yeah. And it can be a little intimidating, but faculty will help with that, and you can go along or help co-present and things like that. So cool. All right, Ashley, how about you? What's your advice?
Going off what I feel like most of us have said, I think my key piece of advice would be a self-care plan. We talked about that a lot, even starting out in the social work program. I hadn't really heard of self-care before, or at least not in the sense of, how we approach self-care. And so I think really being intentional, figuring out, ways that you can prioritize yourself throughout the day. One of my favorite sayings is, you can't pour from an empty cup. And, I feel like we're all here because we care about other people, and we want to help, and we want to be those supports, and we want to be those partners. But, we can't give all of ourselves because then there's going to be nothing left. So, making time for yourself. For me, when I go home, my phone is in a different room for at least an hour. I don't look at my phone. I don't touch my phone. I don't have my watch on, so I don't get notifications. So I'm just present in that moment. Listening to music on my drive to work and on my drive home. And then reading at least 2 chapters of a book a day. So those are doable things. I think that's a big part of self-care too, is don't make more work for yourself. Don't make a plan that's not reasonable, that you're going to have to put extra effort in. Do things that help you, stay in the moment and relax, and just sort of, have that restoration time so that you can continue to be change makers, and, partner with people and, be that support. So.
Yes, well said there. I know I have a love-hate relationship with the term self-care, but the concept of this is really important. And like many of you have already said, it is just, we are doing something unique here, and we're working with people who don't always want to change or see the need for that, or communities that are really struggling with what change looks like, or whole populations of people that change feels very hard, and where do you start, and you don't maybe make progress as quickly as you would like to. So all of that is true, and this is what we do every day. We are trying to make a difference, and that's exhausting, so and essential. So I am just, it's so great as a educator in the field to hear students. I was at I had a student panel the other day in one of my classes, and I walked out of there saying, this is why I do what I do, is because we get to hear your stories and hear the differences that you guys are making in all of the areas that you are managing and working in and studying in. And it's very exciting for us as educators to see, and inspiring, because one thing we say at Morehead State, and I'm sure you've heard it from your faculty members as well, is that we are training you to be our colleagues. And we take that very seriously. We want you to be that person that we say, yeah, she's a social worker, he's a social worker, they're a social worker, because we care about our profession, and we care about how it impacts people. So I'm excited to have you all as colleagues someday.